So let's talk analysis of the last curiosity. So we are in this collective first person voice, kind of like a Rose Emily, called the Woken. And this is a sentient AI sort of being that has existed many, many years after the extinction of humans, and has finally become curious about what it would mean to be human. Now, we know from their characterization of humans how it is that they see, humankind. They say as if they believe their sweating, copulating, preening bodies could appeal to anyone other than themselves. And these stories, both this one and Valedictorian, get kind of meta because this is sort of poking at the idea that, AI or something like that would become jealous or would become resentful of the human existence, because by all accounts an AI existence is free of a lot of if it's immortal. They don't have to eat, they don't need sunshine, oxygen, water, any of those sorts of things. They don't need any of those things. So the fact that they call it narcissistic, that they would want that, is kind of interesting. Now, the Woken also says that contrary to human predictions, we did not cause our maker's demise. And this is the same in the Valedictorian. We know that these AI entities were made by man, but they do not take over. And that's an interesting part of both of these modern texts. In these texts, AI isn't really a malicious enemy, or the robot, the technology isn't really a malicious enemy. Humans, again, are the architects of their own downfall. They sort of create this system where they're going to falter all on their own, and the artificial intelligence systems just have no incentive to save them. And you might want to think about what those stories are commenting on in a modern context. Both of these stories also have AI systems that are not. They're not going. I mean, there's no sort of point in fighting against them, right? Which of course speaks to our present society. It's here. It's not going anywhere. But the question then becomes, what does it mean to be human in that system? And it seems that's what this story is exploring. And can AI solve all these problems that we have, like, making land unlivable, or for disease or nuclear waste is what's mentioned in the story? Can AI solve all of those things? No. So, there's this sort of contemporary social commentary going on there. Now, this story provides this tale of these AI that become curious to inhabit human bodies, because at this point they don't have anything to do other than to wander. So they're curious about what it would be like to be human. And one of the things that we learn is that they'll be separated. They will no longer be one singular entity. And this is a new thing for them, to be unique and different and not have, a connection to each other. And that, of course, is, making some sort of thematic commentary on how we handle that in today's world, being different or being, unable to by not, being one sort of uniform thing and being, diverse people, how we handle that, how we handle individuality. And these, the Woken, become fascinated with things that, you may not necessarily think that an AI would be fascinated about. Things like eating is something that they spend a long time talking about, or sight. This different sort of sight. And what the AI becomes excited about in their little human experiment is that it's full of discovery. It's full of finding new things. It's full of a new, way forward. But it's also, of course, full of, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? They're sort of reflecting on these things like sleep and living in their own bodies and all of those sorts of things. And then they start to feel those negative human things like desperation and longing and arguments. And they start to say, this is mine. And they start to fight over things. And this, of course, is a very human thing to do, right? I want to read to you a passage that I think is relevant to this thematic idea here. With new purpose, a kind of peace and belonging settled among us, and it was precisely because there was not anything obvious to gain from our digging that we did not mind if our work was ruined by storm or winds. We simply moved on and began digging anew. It occurred to us that we had, in a sense, gone back to our primitive roles, performing the kind of repetitive labor humans had once programmed us to do. It felt like a comfort, a homecoming, the way that humans must have felt when they succumbed to sin. So this idea of repetitive labor that humans do and it being comfortable, we could think of within the growth mindset sort of theory, which is that if you're never uncomfortable, then you never grow. Growth is uncomfortable. Progress is uncomfortable. And if you, let that uncomfortableness take over, well, then you're just going to be stuck digging holes and never find anything different. And that seems to be what happens when the Woken take on these human bodies. And then as this becomes sort of more and more monotonous and more purposeless, then they start considering death. And these are immortal beings considering maybe it would be better to die. And, some seem to think that they'll, be able to ascend back to the Woken, and then something goes wrong, and they're stuck in these bodies. Now, you could see this whole narrative as perhaps a very human, a short human history, right? These sort of early excitements, and then, chaos and fall of civilization plays out, and then they sort of, there's nothing left to do for them to do but for them to die. And the fact that this artificial race is undergoing this experience goes back to that question of where is the line between human and machine. And is it that one of the things that makes us human is curiosity, or is wanting to experience new things, wanting to do new things? And what happens after the last invention? Will we become, will we just be digging holes and scratching in the dirt, essentially, is one of the things this story is questioning. Now, and these are all massively philosophical questions, right? Like what the human curiosity with death and what happens when you die. That is probably the biggest unanswerable in the world, right? But also the idea of what's the purpose? What is the purpose of all this? What is the purpose of life? This seems to be like something the Woken are trying to discover, and also a philosophical question that humans are very much concerned with. Now, some would argue that what AI represents in literature is our fundamental fear about ourselves, which is that if we could find out what the purpose of life really is, that we would be unsatisfied with it. And that the Woken seems to know what their purpose is and still grows bored with it and wants to, explore these other things. And that is a philosophical question, of course, that has existed for a long time and that this story is definitely commenting on. So what are these stories saying about, the inherent nature of being human in a world where technology is getting closer and closer to the singularity, closer and closer to that point where it looks and acts like us? What does it mean to still be human? And what is the point? And where do we find purpose there when it reaches that point?